Pregame.com.
Pregame.tv breaking down the Humana Classic. Of course, that's the former Bob Hope Classic. I say, of course, I had no idea. Guess it's right outside of Palm Springs, and I'm Steve Fezzik here with Brady Kannon, who may well talk the entire video here, him being the golf expert. I just saw a guy named Palmer against a guy named Gay. My take is I like the guy named Palmer, but...
Hey, why wouldn't you, right?
Right.
Bob Hope, of course, good friends with Arnold Palmer and a lot of golfers over the years. This is, like I say, has been known for years as the Bob Hope Desert Classic. Kind of similar to our Las Vegas Invitational here, the Shriners that we have in town playing, of course, in the desert, the Phoenix Open. And it's one of those tournaments like the Phoenix that you get a lot of birdies. Not a lot of big names showing up in recent years. Mickelson was there last year. But, you know, the Tigers and the Phils and the Rorys, they kind of wait until maybe next week when we get to Torrey Pines and really get into that West Coast swing schedule. But the players have come back from Hawaii, and not a bad field this week. Webb Simpson, who won here in Las Vegas, is there, and one of the favorites this week, along with Zach Johnson, who won the first tournament of the year at Kapalua in Hawaii.
Let me ask you, as far as a player that maybe one of these lesser tournaments, a marginal to attend or not, might some players be encouraged to go just to like help their own personal statistics, knowing what an easy course it is?
Well, yeah, I think that's a good point. They figured they can go there and maybe cash a ticket, you know, make some money, get warmed up for when the real meat of the season starts. I think that's a lot of what these younger guys are doing. You know, go to Hawaii and play over there, get started on the West Coast, and then you really get into the thick of it with Torrey Pines and the LA Open and the Phoenix Open and Pebble Beach, and then you go over into the Florida swing, and Florida is where you really get a lot of the Europeans, and that's where you really get into the thick of it.
Mm-hmm. Very good. What do the Europeans do as far as the European tour?
They've actually got a big tournament this week, Abu Dhabi, and Tiger is not there. But over in the Middle East, you've got, I believe Mickelson is there, Sergio, Rory, Henrik Stenson, some of the big names that you're familiar with. That's where they are this week while these guys play in Palm Desert. 3 courses this week. It's the Palmer course at PGA West, the Nicklaus course at PGA West, and also La Quinta Country Club. Big pro-am event. It's kind of like the Pebble Beach, the AT&T, where you get some of the amateurs, and it's a very fun, good time. And I think one of the reasons they make a lot of birdies at this tournament is because of the pro-am, where they're not setting up the course to brutalize these amateurs and whatnot. And last 2 years, minus 24 and minus 25 has been the winning score.
Sure. And so I joked about you're going to give me the trifecta here in the tournament. But again, I hate like the needle in the haystack, who's going to win. I hate even asking it because and one
those
thing,
are tough.
And also I hate local radio. I can't tell you how many times like a golf experts come on and the guy will say, "Don't you like any long shots?"
Who's your winner? Pick a winner.
And know what he says all the time? He always says, "I like Alf Muscata at 80 to 1." That's what I've got in my pocket. And Alf is 25 to 1 at every sportsbook, and I can't stand it. There's one guy that used to go to me, and like he would always say, "Oh, I got this team at Pick'em, and they're laying 6," and I'm like, "Hey, it's a great bet. You know, that's great. Shows great competence."
Not anymore.
But it doesn't do me any good on that game. You know, it does do me good to say, "Hey, be sure to bet it 5 times, right when these lines come out." Right. But the value is long gone. But we love the head-to-head matchups. Let me be able to bet on or against a guy.
Those are much easier for me to try and handicap than, you've got 150, 160 guys in the field, and I'm supposed to pick one who's going to win. That's pretty tough. Some of the odds from the LVH and some of the players that I do figure to be in the mix this week, we talked about Ryan Palmer, a guy Harris English, who's really an up-and-comer. Watch that name. He was 4th at the Sony in Hawaii, 11th at Kapalua, and he also won in Cancun. They have a wraparound season now that they've gone to in the PGA Tour. After the PGA Championship, the Ryder Cup, the President's Cup, all that, about mid-October, they start counting FedEx points, and it's for real. And that's good because I think it draws some bigger names, to that part of the year where it used to be called the silly season, and you really didn't start until Hawaii. But a couple guys here, Kevin Na, a local Las Vegan who was injured most of the year last year. He tied for 8 at the Sony in Hawaii. He'd be a good long shot like you talk about here. He's at 60 to 1 at the LVH. Charles Howell, 4 top 10s in this wraparound season so far, also tied for 8th at the Sony. He lost in a playoff last year at the Humana. He's listed at 30 to 1. Zach Johnson, we talked about, won at Kapalua. also tied for 8th at the Sony. He's at 12-1, along with our Shriners Open Invitational winner here in Las Vegas, Webb Simpson, also at 12-1. Billy Horschel, here's a guy on tour last year. I don't know if you know this name, but he was 8th on tour last year in birdies, and this year so far he's 9th. So I like this guy to fare well at a tournament where it's going to take a lot of birdies. I mean, he's a birdie guy, and he's listed at 30-1.
Very good. Get a lot of birdies because he's a long driver or a great putter?
He's a great putter. He's not a bomber. He's a putter and a ball striker.
Very, very good. But you're going to look at one individual matchup here.
Yep.
Are we backing the one guy? Are we fading the other? Or are we doing a little of both? A little of both. You want to go ahead and talk about this one?
You want me to make it official?
Let's do it.
All right. All right, the Humana Challenge. Golf is in season again here at pregame.com, and we're going to take a look at what used to be the Bob Hope Desert Classic. Going to go right to a matchup with a guy, Ryan Palmer, and he is paired at the LVH against Brian Gay. Brian Gay is the defending champion here at the Humana Challenge, won it last year in a playoff over Charles Howell. Ryan Palmer, his history here, he was 4th in 2011 and 6th in 2013. He's a guy that really fares well at these desert venues, does well at the Phoenix Open, does well here in Las Vegas, and has a history, as I mentioned, here in La Quinta. I expect this guy to get hot with a lot of birdies, and I would expect Brian Gay, I'd like to fade him a little bit off of last year's win. The defending champion usually puts up a pretty good run, but Gay is really more of a journeyman player, where I think Palmer is the better player here, and this venue suits his game more so than Gay. Even though Gay got the win last year, I don't think it's going to happen again. I'm going to take Palmer in the matchup over Brian Gay at -120. Pretty short price to lay for what I think is a better player. Good value. We're going with Ryan Palmer over Brian Gay at the Humana Challenge. Make sense?
In Brady,
Just say yes.
In Brady we trust, whether it be football or golf. Hey, in terms of places that have that matchup here locally, obviously the LVH, they got that at the South Point. William Hill, I'm sure, has these, right?
I pay most attention to the LVH because Jeff Sherman is just so good with golf over there, and he posts them for almost all the tournaments, where a lot of the other casinos will just post them for the majors or the marquee events. But this guy has it up week in and week out.
Very good. So I always tell everyone, if you don't know if the product's going to be there, go to the LVH. They're number one in town overall with product. Although William Hill has certainly, expanded tremendously in their
absolutely,
and you can bet right on your phone, which is awfully nice. All right, had a good time discussing golf, but we're going to get back into football. We're going to have a little nice discussion about. So often I keep hearing about there's a square side and a sharp side on every NFL game. It really is just not true. Sometimes it's true, but typically it isn't true. Come back. We're going to debunk that myth. Stay with us. Pregame.tv.